After departing from the postpartum sanctuary, Jason's urgency was palpable. He drove me directly to the Civil Affairs Bureau, as though racing against some invisible clock. The moment our divorce papers were stamped and handed over, a long-absent brightness flickered across his face. Sharp and unmistakable, he glanced down at me, the words leaving his lips with practiced ease. "I'll need to go back and gather my things before I leave." "All right, no trouble at all," I replied, my voice soft, steady, a placid lake undisturbed by storm. He studied me, a crease forming between his brows. "You've changed," he remarked, almost accusingly. "Changed how?" I turned, meeting his gaze with a tranquility that felt like armor. I expected theatrics, clinging, begging, maybe even using the child to bargain. His tone was edged with something like disappointment. A faint smile touched my lips. "You should hurry home and pack. Miss Julia's flight lands tonight, doesn't it? No sense in wasting time. By the time I returned, dusk had settled like a soft shroud over the house. Our child lay sleeping, peaceful under the nanny's watch. Jason lingered near the crib, his expression distant, caught somewhere between duty and desire. "Have you chosen a name?" he asked, the question hanging in the dim light like an uninvited guest. I watched him, amused by the hollow concern etched on his face, a man whose heart was already sprinting toward the airport, yet playing the part of devoted father one last time. "Still," I answered evenly, "Ethan, wholehearted and sincere." Jason's frown deepened. "Not Ethan, he's a child of the Carter family." I smiled at him. "The divorce agreement clearly states the child is in my custody." I paused. "But you'll always be his father if, when he grows up, you want to see him." "I won't stop you." Jason let out a sigh and finally, for the first time, there was a trace of guilt on his face. "Thank you. I won't fall short on child support in the future. That won't be necessary," I responded without hesitation. "I can afford to raise him. You should focus on pursuing your unhappiness." Jason glanced at his phone. "All right, then goodbye, I replied, waving to him before slowly closing the door behind him. It felt good finally being able to shake him off after Jason left. I blocked all of his contact information. Then without delay, I put all 3 of the apartments I owned up for sale online, each listed about 5% below market price. They were sold quickly. I used the proceeds from 2 of them to pay in full for a home in a good school district. The rest I left in the bank to earn interest, keeping some cash on hand to prepare for the right opportunity to make a comeback. Then one day I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Is this Claire?" the woman asked. "This is Julia." "Julia? Why was she calling me?" "Yes, this is Claire. What is it?" I replied slowly. She sounded a bit flustered. "It's Jason. He was in a car accident. Our blood types don't match. Could you come and donate blood?" What a joke. Jason and I had been divorced for almost half a year. I'd heard they registered their marriage certificate the day after our divorce, and now when he needed blood, they thought of me. What did they take me for? Some pathetic leftover? "I'm sorry, Miss Julia," I said coldly. "Jason and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. You've got the wrong person." Her voice trembled on the other end of the line. "Booty just got back to the country, and don't know anyone else. You're the only person I know. Please, I'm begging you, help him." The only person she knew. Julia really had skin thicker than rusted iron. "Miss Julia, maybe because you've been out of the country for a while, you're not familiar with our medical standards. As far as I know, Jason doesn't have a rare blood type. The blood bank has plenty right now. You should be talking to a doctor, not to me with that." I hung up immediately. I had met Jason through a matchmaking event at the time. I was 26, and my family had started urging me to get married. Jason had been the most promising of all the men I met, polite and refined, tall and upright, with a master's degree from a prestigious university. Everything about him seemed proper and gentlemanly. I once asked him, "How many relationships have you been in before?" He looked a bit shy, lowered his head and smiled. "To be honest, that was my first relationship, my first time falling in love." Jason looked at me wide-eyed. "Is it really that hard to believe?" he asked. Then he started pursuing me like crazy. He wasn't lying to me. Not exactly. He just never told me that there had always been someone else living in his heart, someone he secretly adored. After we got married, Jason and I started a film company from scratch. In the past few years, several young artists we signed began gaining recognition. When we were registering the company, I asked Jason, "What should we name it?" He blurted out almost without thinking, "Let's call it JNY Media." It wasn't until 3 years into our marriage that I learned the origin of that name. That night he came home completely wasted. The driver had to carry him upstairs. His consciousness flickered in and out. After 3 years together, it was the first time I'd seen him drink that much. He kept mumbling in his sleep, calling out, "Julia. I miss you, Julia." Julia? Who was Julia? I went through countless possibilities in my head and prepared myself for the worst. Jason threw up multiple times that night and I stayed by his side taking care of him the entire time. The next morning when he woke up and saw me resting on the edge of the bed, he looked a bit guilty and reached out to gently touch my face. You've been through a lot, sweetheart. I smiled faintly. Last night you kept calling out Julia's name. Who is she? He clearly hadn't expected me to ask so directly and immediately sat up in bed, startled. After a long pause, he finally said, Julie and I are what you think. Then what are you? I asked. He lit a cigarette and said, Julie and I grew up together a few years ago. She moved abroad, but don't worry, nothing ever happened between us. The disappointment ran from the top of my head all the way down to the soles of my feet. Looking at the man he had shared a bed with for over 3 years, he suddenly felt like a stranger to me. I let out a cold laugh. So all these years, those business trips to the UK, were they really just to see her? Jason lowered his head and went silent. He didn't say a word for a long time. From that point on, Jason and I became strangers, living under the same roof, but fate has its own cruel sense of humor. 2 months later, during a routine checkup, I found out I was pregnant. For the sake of the baby, I considered giving him a chance. I didn't want my child to be born without a father. When I was 4 or 5 months along, I brought the prenatal test results to Jason. His eyes lit up with surprise and joy. Why didn't you tell me something this important sooner? Does it really matter to you? I asked him. Of course it does, Jason said, sweeping me into his arms. You and the baby mean everything to me. Looking at him then, I thought, maybe he wasn't a good husband, but perhaps he could be a decent father. But the higher your hopes, the deeper your disappointment. Jason spared no expense finding the best private hospital for me as my due date approached. I was on bed rest nearly every day, but Jason rarely came to visit. He always said, with you not at the company, everything's on me. I'm too busy. I'll come see you when I can. On the day I gave birth, I almost didn't make it. I was in the delivery room for over 10 hours, but Jason never showed up after the delivery. I lay weakly in the hospital bed. His assistant, a young woman, stood beside me. It must have been so hard. Congratulations, she said with a polite smile. I smiled back faintly. Where's Mr. Carter? She scratched her head awkwardly. He said an important client was flying in today, so he went to the airport. He'll come see you once he's done. I knew every single one of the company's major clients. I looked up at her and asked, what client could possibly be more important than his wife giving birth? She stammered. I'm not sure. Mr. Carter didn't give any specifics. You just gave birth, and you're still weak. Please try to get some rest. I looked at the young girl. She seemed freshly out of college and didn't want to make things difficult for her. All right. It wasn't until the 3rd day after I gave birth that Jason finally appeared. He brought a huge bouquet of flowers and stood in front of me. Sweetheart, you've worked so hard, he said, then leaned down and kissed my forehead. He looked over at our son. He really looks like me. I looked at Jason and felt nothing but disgust. All the emotions I had been bottling up finally erupted. Tears streamed down my face, falling in loud drops onto the blanket. It startled Jason so much that he visibly jumped while crying and cursing him. In my heart, I asked Jason, where have you even been these past few days? Did you know I was in labor for over 10 hours? I nearly died on the operating table. You once said the baby and I were the most important people in your life. Then why couldn't you be there for us? I was already sobbing so hard I couldn't speak clearly, but I cried even harder on purpose. I was putting on a show, one I wanted Jason to see, because only through this performance could I make him feel even more guilty. Deep down, already weak and exhausted, the crying made me start turning pale. Jason, I know I can't stop you from loving someone else. If you think I'm just in the way, then I can stop being Mrs. Carter, but could you at least share a little of your love with me and the baby? Just a little. Jason frowned, his face tense. I am sorry, Claire, I really am. I've wronged you. I turned my head and wiped away my tears. Then I forced a weak smile and said, don't say you're sorry. You're my husband, the father of my child, and the man I love most. Even I felt nauseous saying those words, but I smiled at Jason anyway. Starting from that day, Jason began visiting me and the baby in the hospital regularly, acting like a devoted father. But every time he came, I made sure to cry. I cried about how hard things had been for me. I cried about how I had supported him through building the company from nothing. I cried about how deeply I loved him because I knew his personality well. He'd get tired of hearing it soon enough. He would start missing the woman he called his white moonlight, Julia, and convince himself how much better she was than me. That would bring him closer to the moment when he would finally ask me for a divorce. And all my crying, all those dramatic confessions were like emotional, my version of psychological warfare. I wanted him to feel guilty when he eventually asked for the divorce, so I could get more from him in return. What Jason didn't know was that I had already found out about every meeting he had with Julie over the past few months. Ever since I learned about her, I hired a private investigator every time Julia's plane landed. I knew after 40 straight days of my calculated weeping Jason finally snapped. He yelled at me in a low growl, "Claire, can you stop already? Don't you ever get tired of saying the same things over and over, because I'm sick of hearing them. I can't believe I didn't realize how exhausting you are." He waved his arm toward the room in frustration. "Look around this hospital. Is there anyone else being this unreasonable? You're acting like a total shrew." I swallowed my rising anger and asked in a low voice, "So what do you want?" Jason went silent for a long moment before finally saying, "Let's get a divorce. I'll bring the papers tomorrow." Then he turned and stormed out of the room. But what Jason didn't know was that I had already made up my mind to divorce him, because the truth wash wasn't going to live much longer. Me thoughts snapped back to the present as I kept replaying Julia's phone call in my mind. There were doctors who could handle the situation, so why had she called me? We'd been divorced for over 6 months, and hadn't had any contact. Why now? I put on a full face of makeup and carefully dressed myself. Then I called Jason's assistant. He heard Mr. Carter was in a car accident. I said casually, "Was it serious? Which hospital is he at?" She sounded surprised by my questions. "At Third Hospital," she said after a pause. "Are you planning to visit?" "Yeah, Julia called me. Said they needed a blood donut." I only figured it wouldn't hurt to dose a meeting. Good for once after all. We were married. There's still some sentiment there. She seemed relieved on the other end. "Okay. Got it. He's in room 302. Do you want me to let him know you're coming?" "No need," I said, hanging up. I was curious to see what kind of game Julia was playing this time. When I walked into room 302, Jason was alone, lying quietly on the hospital bed. His head was wrapped in bandages, but aside from that, I didn't see any visible injuries. He was staring at the window, and didn't even notice I had entered, so I gently knocked on the door from inside the room. Jason slowly turned his head when he saw me. Jason's eyes widened. "Claire, what are you doing here?" I gave him a gentle smile. "Miss Julia called me earlier and said you were in a car accident and needed a blood transfusion. So I came to check on you." A flicker of light passed through his otherwise downcast eyes, but it faded quickly. "Thanks for your concern," he said. "I am fine now." "Oh, and where's Miss Julia?" I asked casually. "She probably went to handle the hospital fees." "Well, if you're fine, I'll be on my way." I turned around to leave. "Where did you move to?" "I haven't been able to find you," Jason called after May turned back, still smiling. "And why are you trying to find me?" His gaze shifted uneasily, avoiding mine. "I want to see the baby." Letting him see the child had only been a tactic to make him feel guilty, a stalling move before the divorce, and now he suddenly wanted to see the baby. I didn't respond. Jason said nothing else and walked out of the hospital room without looking back. Outside, Julia was standing at the door. I had no idea how long she had been there. This was the first time I'd seen Julia face to face. She was even more delicate and demure in person than in the photos, her features finely shaped, and surprisingly, she resembled me a bit, or rather, in Jason's eyes, I probably looked like her. I had no desire to get entangled with her, so I turned to leave, but she softly called out behind me, "Claire, it's really you." I looked at her, a picture of gentle vulnerability, seemingly untouched by the world, and suddenly I understood why Jason had never been able to forget her. When I didn't respond, she continued, "I really didn't expect you to come." "Thank you, Claire. I am still new to Beijing, don't know many people, and I panicked earlier. I hope I didn't bother you. I wasn't in the mood to play along." "If he's okay, that's good. I'll be leaving now." But Julia suddenly stepped in front of me, blocking my way. "Actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you. Could I have just a few minutes of your time?" "Of course." I knew she had a reason for calling me here. "What is it?" I asked, pulling a smile across my face that didn't reach my eyes. "Well, when you and Jason divorced, didn't he give you all the property?" She began. "The company's been going through a rough patch. You probably know that, Jason. He's too proud to ask, but could you help him out for the sake of JNY Media, something you both built together?" I looked at her eager face and found it laughable. So this was it. They were after my assets. She was the kind who wouldn't even leave bones after a feast. Jason had given me the properties and cash savings, but he kept the company. In his eyes, the company was the goose that laid golden eggs, far more valuable than any real estate. Back when we ran the company together, our roles were clearly divided. Jason handled content rights and film promotion, while I was responsible for talent management and finance. He had no idea how much cash flow was required to keep the company running. Without liquid assets, a business dries up fast. Naturally, the financial stress made it harder for him to support Julia's extravagant lifestyle, and she, of course, wasn't going to accept that easily. I looked at Julia, still standing there with her demure voice and downcast eyes, and replied in a soft, equally pitiful tone, "So you do remember that I helped build the company with Jason, and now that the company's all yours, what else do you want from me?" Julia saw the sadness I feigned and lowered her voice even more. "Claire, Jason already gave you the houses, the cars, and 20 30 million in savings. We're not asking for much, just 10 million, the rest you can keep to raise your child. I looked at Julia baffled. How could she say all this with a straight face? I let out a sigh. Miss Julia, the company was preparing to go public. It was valued at 200 to 300 million. What I got doesn't even scratch the surface. I know you studied musical theater overseas. Jason told me everything. How he started this company to help you fulfill your dreams. That's why I didn't fight him. I handed over JNY Media, something I worked for years to build. Without a word, I paused for a moment. So tell me, is the company in trouble? Julia finally spoke slowly and carefully. You know how hard it is to run a business. Money is tight everywhere, but for the sake of Jason being your child's father, don't you think you should help him? As she spoke, she pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. This is the account number. You can just transfer the money to this account. Julia said, huh? She really came prepared, already had the bank account number written down. That abacus in her head was clicking loud and clear, but whether the money was truly for the company or to line her own pockets, she knew better than I did. I looked at Julia and sighed deeply several times. I really want to help you, I said, but unfortunately I can't. All my funds are currently tied up in a trust. I don't have any liquid cash at the moment. Then I looked at her apologetically. I might have 30 or 50,000 on hand. If you're in a bind, I can lend that to you for now. No rush on paying it back. Julia's eyes went wide like copper bells. Claire, seriously, you're kidding, right? I looked at her kindly. It's not that I don't want to help. I really just don't have the ability right now. Look, you asked me to come donate blood and I came immediately. I help when I can. Would I say no otherwise? Seeing that, I wouldn't give in. Julia's expression suddenly shifted. She changed faces faster than flipping a page in a book. Claire, enough with the act, she snapped. If you don't want to give, just say so. Don't pretend to be all nice and selfless. Well, there it was, her real face finally showing. I calmly reached into my bag and took out a business card. This is a finance firm. They invested in JNY Media when we first started the company. You could try talking to them. Julia's eyes flickered as she took the card from my hand. You really want to help us? Of course, I said. You think I hate you? Everyone has the right to pursue happiness. Jason loves you. Letting go is the best choice for all three of us. Don't you agree? I paused, then added, Jason didn't look too good today. You should schedule a full health checkup for him. With that, I turned and walked out of the hospital. Outside, I tossed the slip of paper with the account number Julia had given me straight into the trash. Then I pulled out a disinfecting wipe from my purse and carefully cleaned my hands. Julia had actually asked me if I hated her. Ridiculous. Why would I bother hating her? After all, her precious Jason was a man who didn't have much time left. Who would want that? Meanwhile, my child was growing up day by day with my mom and the postpartum nanny helping out. I finally had time to focus on rebuilding my career. Lately, several artists I had once managed started venting in our private group chat. J and Y is a mess now. One said, that new woman Julia, didn't she study musical theater abroad or something? She has no clue how to run a company, but the boss listens to her about everything. Yeah, another chimed in, budgets tight across the board. We had to beg just to get funding for our last variety show. One company almost invested in us, but after a few rounds of talks with Julia, the deal just died. At this rate, we're doomed. Someone else said. I already lost 2 brand deals. I looked at the calendar. Most of their 5-year contracts with J. Andy were about to expire. Half joking, half serious, I typed, what if I started a new agency? You in? We're already packing. Someone replied, I've been waiting for this day forever. Another added. I smiled to myself. These kids were all in the prime of their careers. Staying at JNY would only drag them down. This time, I picked the company name myself. I called it Sincere Media. As the artists' contracts expired and they officially announced their departures, their farewell posts exploded on social media. It trended immediately. I was sitting in my newly leased office reviewing management contracts when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I already knew who it was. I hesitated for a while, then finally answered. In the third ring, Julia's voice came through. Claire, did you really have to go this far? It's one thing if you don't want to help Jason and me, but now you're poaching our artists. To what are you talking about? I asked calmly. Don't play dumb. She snapped. That investor you introduced, total scam. They came in asking for original shares. Do you think I'm stupid? She was furious, swearing non-stop. And now you're taking all our artists, too. I can't believe how low you're willing to stoop. How did Jason ever fall for someone like you? I stayed calm. Miss Julia, I said, maybe Jason never told you, but I'm the one who signed every single one of those artists myself. I was the one who worked tirelessly to sign and train those artists, building them up step by step. You know how this industry is. It's golden. Years are short. These kids can't afford to waste time. From what I've heard, JY's financial situation isn't exactly stable these days. Julia's voice rose even higher in response to my words, her anger spiking. That's only because Jason gave you all the money after the divorce. I laughed lightly. Because he was chasing love, wasn't he? Such a sincere and beautiful love. So pure it made him abandon his wife and child and give up everything earned. That here's nothing more to talk about, I added, and even if there were, it wouldn't be with you. Then I hung up. I started thinking, how was Jason's health now, judging by how things looked? Julia clearly hadn't taken my advice seriously. She probably never scheduled that full checkup for him. The next time I saw Jason was at an annual industry summit hosted by a major media platform. Julia was holding onto his arm as they entered the venue. Her belly was slightly rounded. She was glowing with that smug maternal aura. When Jason spotted me, he started to raise his hand as if to greet me, but Julia quickly tugged it back down. I looked at Jason. He didn't seem well. His complexion was pale, lips tinged with bluish purple. He still looked normal to most people, but to me, he resembled a strawman, hollowed out, barely holding together. During the intermission, I approached him near the refreshments. Have you had a medical checkup recently? I asked. You look exhausted. Jason seemed caught off guard by my concern. You came all the way over here just to ask me that? Don't overwork yourself, I said. The company can wait. Your health is more important. Jason gave me a tired smile. Just been too busy lately, that's all. How are you and the baby? Good, I started to reply, but before I could finish, Julia appeared from behind and cut me off. Oh, an old flame rekindled, she said sweetly, but with clear sarcasm. Julia, don't start, Jason said, frustrated. Claire and I haven't been in contact at all. I looked at him. He sounded just like he had the day he told me. Julia and I aren't what you think. I glanced at Julia's baby bump, then smiled. Maybe you should pay more attention to your husband's health. Julia noticed I was staring at her belly and tilted her chin, her voice dripping with pride. My child will grow up in a happy home, unlike some other kids who were born into single-parent families. As soon as she finished, Jason gave her dress a little tug. Enough, that's enough. Looking at Julia standing there, I actually felt sorry for her. If she kept ignoring Jason's condition, her child might grow up never knowing their father. So who was truly the pitiful one? I didn't bother responding. I turned around and returned to my seat. Actually, that medical exam I mentioned earlier, Jason and I had done it together more than 6 months ago. Our company had scheduled annual health checkups for all employees, and neither of us were exceptions. That was when I discovered I was pregnant. Jason had been too busy with a project to pick up his results, so I got them for him. His report clearly stated, large shadow detected in the lung, suspected mid-stage lung cancer. Further examination and immediate treatment recommended. But Jason's phone was off. Pregnant and panicked, I carried the report and searched everywhere for him. The private investigator Ired told me he was with Julia at the time, then sent me a photo of them enjoying a candle at dinner together. In that picture, Jason was smiling in a way I had never seen before, the kind of joy he never once showed me. After 4 years together, I had only ever been a stand-in for the woman he truly loved, his white moonlight Julia. That night, I placed Jason's medical report and the company's annual financial report side by side on his desk. Then, I sent him a text. The health report and the company year-end files are on your desk. But Jason never touched those papers, not even when he packed up and moved out, because all he cared about was his Julia. Judging by the timeline, if Jason didn't start treatment soon, he probably wouldn't survive. The winter time passed quickly, and under my management, Sincere Media steadily found its footing. I had thought I'd finally cut all ties with Julia and Jason until one day Julia showed up at the door of my office. She looked a little worn down, but she was still dressed immaculately in a loose vintage-style outfit that looked like something a grandmother might wear. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. Claire, Jason's dying. My child is going to grow up without a father, she sobbed uncontrollably. Why is our fate so tragic? Julia had studied musical theater, but you'd think she majored in drama. Ash wept until she collapsed to the floor, and I slowly helped her onto the couch. So what brings you here today? Julia looked at me with teary, pleading eyes. Claire, the doctors say Jason might only have a few months left. I've been thinking you want to take him to Switzerland to recover. Always loved the scenery there. I just want him to be happy before he goes. She paused. We won't be able to keep up with JNY anymore since it was something you both built together. I'd like to hand it over to you. Hand it over to me. What was this new performance? Looking at her tear-streaked face, I felt a flicker of pity. You're giving it to me. You're not coming back from Switzerland? No, I won't be coming back. Julia slowly pulled out a few neatly bound A4 sheets from her bag. Claire, your new company is doing so well, why not just take over JNY too? I asked finance to draft a contract. You can buy it at cost. I just need some funds for our life in Switzerland. That brief moment of pity I'd felt vanished completely. So this was the real plan, offloading a failing business for cash. Did she think I was an idiot? Still, business is business if the price was reasonable. I didn't mind acquiring JNY. I took the contract from her and flipped through it casually. 50 million. I double-checked the number. Yes, she wanted 50 million. With JNY's current assets and ruined reputation, I'd hesitate even if She were asking for 5 million and she had the nerve to offer it for 50 ISN, T 50 million, a bit much. I smiled politely, seeing that I was at least talking. Julia leaned in eagerly. But Claire, you said it yourself, Jay. And why was once valued at 2 to 300 million? 50 million isn't that much to you. Taking it over wouldn't be a loss. No loss, she said. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. But Jay, and why didn't have a single recognizable artist left? I'd heard they were even defaulting on project payments, paying 50 million for a mountain of debt. What did she take me for? She could fool Jason with this act, but not me. I slowly stood from the sofa. I am sorry, Miss Julia. I can't help you. She bit her lip. If 50 is too high, what about 40? I didn't have time to play games. I wouldn't take it even if it was for million. Julia's eyes widened. So you're just going to watch company you built be destroyed? Company Jason, it's all yours now, isn't it? I said calmly. Please leave, Miss Julia, or I'll have to call security. At the mention of security, her expression unraveled. Her tone became wild and shrill. Claire, you heartless witch, why is it so hard to get you to cough up a little money? You're obsessed with it, drowning in it. She kept ranting. Yuri, so calculating, dumping a wreck company on Jason, and walking away with a pile of cash. She can't believe you did this. Walked away with cash. Funny, the division of assets had been Jason's decision, as if Julia hadn't known that. I looked at her coldly. Wasn't it your idea to let Jason take the company during the divorce? Julia raised her voice. So what if it was? Blame Jason for being so stupid. Didn't even know what the company was worth. If he hadn't told me it was worth $500 million, do you think I'd have wanted this mess? She was still fuming, so caught up in her tirade that she didn't notice the very men she was insulting. Jason, standing silently behind her. Jason stood quietly behind Julia, let his face drawn and lifeless. He looked at her with a blank, empty gaze. I let out a cold laugh. Weren't you two supposed to be true love? True love? Julia's voice cracked with rage. What a load of crap. She was shaking all over. If that idiot Jason hadn't kept going on and on about how profitable that damn company was, do you think I would have looked at him twice? Do you think I would have come all the way back from the UC for him? He's just a glorified loser who got lucky. As she spoke, her body swayed, and she nearly fell over. Jason caught her from behind. Julia slowly turned her head. Jason, how long have you been standing there? Jason's voice was low. Long enough. After a long silence, he said, let's go. Stop embarrassing yourself. That was the last time I ever saw either of them. The final contact I had with Jason was a phone call. He used the company's landline. The number was one I recognized immediately. I pressed the answer button. Hello. But no one spoke, just silence. I was about to hang up when I finally heard a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Claire, it's me. I know, I said. Jason was quiet for a while. I'm sorry. What's there to be sorry for? I replied, all of that is in the past. I've always been someone who knows when to hold on and when to let go. He sighed. Julia went back to the UK. She terminated the pregnancy. She won't be bothering you anymore. I paused. Why are you calling me today? What do you really want to say? Jason's voice was faint, nasal, like he'd just been crying. Claire, I just wanted to apologize. I once had a chance to be a good husband, a good father, doing work I loved and was good at, and that should have been enough to make me happy, but I lost my Mindy, ruined everything. I regret it. When I didn't say anything, he kept talking. Claire, I'm dying. I don't know if you believe me, but during chemo, during every treatment, all I could think about was you. He staying up with me while I worked overtime. He taking care of me through the night when I was sick. I cut him off, my voice cold. What's the point of saying all this now? Jason's voice trembled as he asked, Claire, can I see you and the baby just once before I go? I miss you both so much. He started to cry softly on the other end of the line. There's no need for that anymore, I said. If there's nothing else, I have a meeting. I'm hanging up now. And I did, but my chest ached as if something inside had been yanked hard. Jason and I once had something beautiful, but I could never accept being just a stand-in for the woman he truly loved, so I let go. I gave her back to him. After Jason died, he left me a letter and the remaining 5 million from the sale of JNY. I never opened the letter. I donated the entire 5 million to a public charity and started a foundation in his name. That I think was the last shred of dignity I could give him. The end. Top of form, bottom of form.